Hello, I'm Roberta Winters, past president of the League of Women Voters of Radnor Township. I now have a new role as president of the Delaware County Interleague Organization, or ILO. It's basically a board that works with the Radnor League and the Central Delaware County League on Delaware County matters. Of course, the biggest of these areas right now is elections. From the national to state and local levels, we are spending our time and effort to help make democracy work. As you know, the League is also a trusted, nonpartisan source of election information. Vote 411 is the place to go to find out about voter registration, polling places, what's on the ballot, and even the candidates. It's important to make sure and check your registration this month so that you can re-register, if you need to, by the October 21st deadline. For those of us who live in Radnor, changes in our wards and polling places may be approved for the November 5th election. If it is not implemented this fall, it will probably be done for the spring primary. Well, just what's happening? I have someone here who can help us. Jim Allen, the Director of Election Bureau for Delaware County, will help us learn more about these changes. Thank you, Jim, for joining us today.
Roberta, thank you.
Well, I know some of our audience is familiar with you and your role, but would you just give us a brief update about yourself and what you do?
So, Delaware County it hired me to be their director of elections, the first to oversee the Bureau of Elections, the voting machine warehouse, and the voter registration departments. So we now took those three silos, we've merged them under one department so that the three work together on everything from preparation of the voting equipment to recounts and everything in between.
Well, I know that thanks to fair districts, a lot of people in Pennsylvania know about gerrymandering, and we've done several shows about that right here on Radnor Television Studio 21 in the past. And luckily, Jim, you were not in Delaware County when we, as part of Delaware County, were nationally known for our oddly shaped 7th Congressional District. And that was where our representative was elected for us. If it wasn't for a court case spearheaded by a young piano teacher, Amanda Holt, we'd probably still be voting in an area that looked like that. Now, can you give us a big picture about gerrymandering based on your experience?
Sure. And even though I'm familiar with the old map of the 7th District, but it's a problem nationwide. And voters in different states have attacked gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is basically where you make districts that are shaped more like jigsaw puzzle pieces than compact areas that respect natural boundaries or communities or municipalities. So instead, they may go along narrow lines and connect this glob of voters to this glob of voters. But gerrymandering is essentially where the politicians are picking their voters instead of vice versa. So there are people who are trying to game the system. And in many states, they've set up independent map-making commissions so that when the census data come out, there's a sensible set of rules and regulations that they follow to develop districts that make sense and that are not trying to, what they call, pack and crack different bodies of voters. Well,
I'm sure you're also familiar with redistricting too. First, how and when is that done?
So depending on the jurisdiction, but states always do it after the census. So in the case of Pennsylvania, we redrew the legislative lines through a process that lasted until after the 2020 census. That lasted through, the results came out in 11, and then they had a year to draw those and implement those, and they implemented those at the beginning of 2022. So it was a very, very drawn-out process. It took a little longer than they anticipated, and in fact, it made it difficult for candidates to file for their nominating petitions, because for a while, the state representative districts were kind of in limbo until they finally were approved. So then at the municipal level, they also performed this. So in Radnor Township's case, in their charter, they require themselves, they require the township to redistrict after each census. And redistricting is a way to make sure that it's as close as possible to one person, one vote, so that each district has roughly the same number of residents. And notice I say residents and not voters, because you may have more people who are children who are not voting age. So you have 4,000 in each district. You may not have the same number of voters, but you have the same number of residents, so that everybody has roughly the same say in each of the 7 wards in Radnor Township.
Well, did you find in looking at the numbers that our population shift that much in Delaware County over the decade?
Not tremendously. I mean, there are some new growth areas. If you go further west, you saw a lot of newer development, especially where the mall used to be out in Middletown Township. And it's picking up steam again. They're going to build additional housing. And you saw things like that throughout the county. But there wasn't any kind of radical shift.
Right. Well, that's good. Now, is there anything other than population that we look at when we draw those lines?
Well, depending on the diversity of the community, they may want to take into consideration, low incomes, different socioeconomic. So it could be by a combination of race or ethnicity or economic strata, but more importantly, neighborhoods and subsets of communities. So you want to make sure that you're not splitting up a community needlessly, so that half of the voters are now merged to a district that they're not really wed to, and the other half likewise are merged to another district they're not wed to either.
Well, I know in addition to population impacts and drawing the lines for the representative, just why is it important that we do this every 10 years? Is there a reason for this? I know, other than just the voters. Well,
nationally, we have to do this to keep our states even proportional in the House of Representatives, our House of Commons, if you will. So if the southern states have picked up population, it's only right that the southern states are going to pick up more representatives in Congress. Likewise, if there are western states or Rust Belt states that have lost population, we lose. So that's why Midwestern states have contracted a little bit, all the way up to the eastern seaboard to New York, have contracted a little bit, because while their populations are growing, they're not growing as fast as they are in the Sun Belt. So it's important that when that happens, when we go from 20 districts to 19 or 19, whatever the number is, that we make sure that the new district lines are representative, so that there are roughly the same number of residents, 700,000 residents in each district.
Well, I know when I first came to Radnor, our township was divided into 3 representative districts, and that was kind of crazy. But during the last redistricting, we now have only 1 representative for our district, which is the 165th. But I think sometimes those lines that were put in Radnor also become the basis for making those representative districts. So we start right here by drawing lines that in fact have an impact both at the state and national level. And if they're done kind of crazy here, it just gets crazier as you move up the system.
It does. And I think the latest round of maps reflect a lot more consistency, where entire townships are kept intact, or at a minimum, there are some natural boundaries, so that within a township, maybe there's a municipality on the north end and another municipality on the south end, but those are kept intact. So Radnor, for example, used to have more than one magisterial district judge. They used to have more than one state representative, representing a portion. And now their districts, you have one state senator, one state rep, one magisterial district judge, which means that empowers Radnor voters to be more likely to have a say in the selection of that individual.
It's made a difference. And I would like you to think about that current map of Radnor right now and its wards and precincts. Can you tell anything about the districts that we have now in Radnor by just looking at that map?
Well, perhaps the biggest and most profound change that happened between the old map and the new map is that at the Villanova campus, none of the students or faculty who lived on campus were really voting anywhere near their campus. They had to be sent in one of 4 different directions. And then based on if they moved from one dormitory to another dormitory from the spring to the fall, they had to update the registration. So what was happening is that there was a shuttle bus system there at the campus. And, you get on bus 1, she gets on bus 4, he gets on bus 3, she gets on bus 2. And even though you got on bus 2 last time, or bus 4 last time, you're on bus 2 this time. It was just kind of a crazy quilt of a situation for administrators there. Likewise, there were some oddly shaped areas where they tried to basically build up the population to meet the standard, and so some of the districts kind of reached out, and now they're much more compact, and they follow major roads, different towns within Radnor Township. So you have more of Wayne together, you have more of Villanova together, you have more of all the different communities together.
Well, I know that people sometimes complain because they live on a street and the people on the opposite side of the street vote in a place that's not where they vote. And this, they're served by a different commissioner. So just where did one begin to draw the lines?
Eventually, you have to draw a line somewhere. So it might be that, Lancaster is right down the middle. And so, the people who live in the upstairs of the storefronts on this side are voting in a different district than this one. But there's very little way to get around that. Eventually, you have to come up with a boundary that works for separating wards and then down to the precinct level. So most often, it could be a railroad track. It could be, a major street or thoroughfare, or it could be a stream or a creek or something like that.
Well, I know somebody told me they had to start with the census blocks, too.
Yes, they do.
And I think that those are determined beyond us, and they really have to think twice about not violating those census blocks.
Yes, so census tracts are then broken down into census blocks. And under state law, you cannot violate, you can't split up a census block. And that helps prevent the possibility that half of a small pocket of a neighborhood is voting at one place and half is in another, or voting for different officials. So that's one of the items that state law provides for.
Well, using computers nowadays makes drawing the ward lines much easier. And I think you probably realize that a subcommittee of the Radnor Township Commissioners formed a special body just to look at redistricting, because that's under the Home Rule Charter. The commissioners are responsible for doing this. And they actually hired Amanda Holt. And she's the woman whose work, upended the kinds of bad policies and procedures that were being done at the state level and got rid of that incredibly, we called it, goofy kicking Donald district that we used to have in Delaware.
Well, I've seen them in a lot of jurisdictions. I've seen them shaped. They look like, one looks like a snake with 2 heads. I've seen them where it looks like Bart Simpson running down the street. I've seen all kinds of different shapes. And fortunately, the hope is that these will continue to go away, whether it's through court cases or, applications of federal legislation to make sure that districts are fair and compact. So,
Well, compact means not having all these tentacles sticking out,
Exactly.
right? Sort of like sticking together. Well, Amanda Holt loves to do puzzles, you know. And I think this process really is like doing a puzzle. And she just sort of looks at the maps and looks at the population. And then because she knows a little bit about Radnor Township, she's able to make some drafts. And then once she has some draft maps, the commissioners and the residents have a chance to look at those and provide their input at public meetings. And that's really a fairly transparent process. It's not ideal, but it's better than it is in most places where some of these lines are drawn behind closed doors and sealed and approved. What's your experience like in having redistricting done in a public way as opposed to a sort of closed door effort?
Well, I mean, I think you're going to have more community engagement if you do it in an open way. You know, that's the best way, and that's going to reduce the prospect of someone saying, you know, you did this and it caused X, and there was no discussion of the possibility of that. Whereas now everybody has the opportunity to speak up and raise questions about what is being done, and then the officials who are overseeing it have the ability to answer, this is why, or and it may not satisfy the person with the question, but nonetheless, I think that's a better way to go than to, as you said, do it all behind closed doors and then just present it as a fait accompli. I've seen it done both ways, and I've seen it actually done fairly, even when it wasn't really a long, drawn-out community involvement, because it kind of depends on the situation, the shape of the community, and whether you're just adjusting around the margins or whether you're trying to throw out the whole, baby with the bathwater. There's another township that went through the redistricting process, and essentially it has 5 districts, and there's one in the middle, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 on the outside, and it largely stayed the same. So, I don't know how transparent their process was, but when it came down to it, it was still the same,
basically the
same puzzle pieces, and they weren't jigsaw puzzle pieces. They were solid.
Well, I know numbers play a big part in the redistricting process, and there can only be so much variation between different wards and districts as they're drawn. Is this true in Radnor as you looked at how they were redistricted? Yes.
So it's a complicated process because even the census data can be slightly off. So one of the areas where the census data seemed to be a little bit off was in how certain areas of college campuses have a common address. I know that this is, for example, if you go to Swarthmore College, everybody's at 500 College Avenue. Well, not everybody's at 500 College Avenue, and that kind of thing can skew the numbers a little bit. But by putting Villanova largely in 2 wards where it used to be in 4 wards, now that reduces the possibility of that skewing affecting the neighboring wards.
Well, now we're going to look at the proposed map, and you notice some things that are remarkably different from the current map that we have, and I think you've already mentioned that Villanova seems to be a little more compact than it was before, and we don't have so many protrusions, shall we say, going in and out to make it look like there may have been something going on that didn't make them as contiguous as they could be or as compact. So what do you think about the new proposed map that you've looked at as opposed to the old one? I assume from what you've said before, it's a lot better.
It is a lot better because, like you said, the districts make more sense. You're going to have challenges trying to come up with the numbers, as you alluded to. But similar to the other community I was talking with, there's a couple of wards in the middle, and then the other ones all the way around that form the entire township. Overall, I thought they did a good job.
Well, once the map was drawn and approved in December, it then couldn't just go into effect. There are other things that have happened since then. Mm-hmm. Just what's happened since December of 2022?
Well, it was January of 2023 when we were first presented, and it was already then too late to even begin to contemplate putting into the municipal election in 2023 because people were gearing up to circulate their petitions. It's a 2-month process just to get into court. So by when it was delivered to us with the last amendment in January of 2023, we would have been in court in March trying to get that implemented, and people would be already circulating petitions. Now, all those individuals ran under those boundaries. They're going to be running under the same boundaries in the fall of 2023. The next complicating thing was we looked at trying to do it in the fall, and basically, Radnor Township was not in favor of that. Then we looked at doing it in the spring, this past spring of 2024, but there again, people are running for Republican committeewoman and committeemen. So they were running at the precinct level. So messing that up would have messed up their petitions or pit two individuals against each other when they used to be in two separate precincts and now they're in the same precinct. So those are the complications. Now we're at an election where it seems counterintuitive, but at a big turnout election, and with a very simplified ballot, this is the best time to implement this plan, because even if someone gets to the wrong precinct and we have the electronic poll books to tell them you need to go to St. Mary's Church if you're at Ithan Elementary. So we have the electronic poll pads, but let's say it's 5 minutes to 8 and they don't have time to go there. Well, they're going to cast a provisional ballot. But this is the one election where all the ballots all across Radnor have the same list of contests and the same exact list of candidates. So your ballot casts in one precinct. If you show up at the wrong one and you either don't want to or don't have time to get to that other precinct, it will count in full. So we feel strongly that we're going to be able to get the word out to all the voters. We're going to do 3 mailings. We've done precinct moves as little as 2 weeks before an election, and with 1 mailing, and the word gets around. But we're going to take extra steps. We're going to put signage up on the Radnor Trail. We've developed a QR code so that people can share this with their family members and their neighbors and everything like that. So we're working closely with the township. The township's going to push the information out to the voters. Please go to this pa.gov site or click on this QR code. Make sure that you know where your polling place is. For the vast majority of voters in Radnor Township, they'll be voting in the same precinct and probably the same location that they did last year. But there's going to be that 20% who are going to be voting in a different place perhaps. So we want to make sure that we engage and inform every single voter.
Well, I know the League of Women Voters will help you in any way we can to make sure that happens. I also know that sometimes polling places can be a change. As you said, it's not only just changing the wards, but also in looking at polling places. And I know several years ago, the League was a part of looking at some of those polling places. Mm-hmm. And we know often they're in public places like churches and libraries and firehouses. And several years ago, the school district was concerned because there was disrupting the school calendar. However, now with online learning, as you know, we can have schools closed and still have the value of some instruction.
But typically schools do close on at least the November election day, sometimes also on the primary day. But schools are a natural gathering place for every community. Right. So if we place a polling place at Wayne Elementary, chances are everybody in that general area of the township knows where it is familiar with it, has been there perhaps for, if not one of their own children's events, someone else they know, or it's been the site of some other meeting or something like that. So schools and municipal buildings are the preferred, libraries are the preferred sites, but sometimes we have to go into private facilities. Churches come to mind. Civic association is under consideration right now. So, there's a variety of locations that we need to use.
Well, I know during COVID it was a real juggling act, but thank goodness we're over that hurdle.
Knock on wood, yes.
Now, the proposed map was sent after some delay to the Delaware County Board of Elections. What constitutes this Delaware County Board of Elections, and what do they do? Delaware
County is a home rule charter county. Mm-hmm. In a lot of counties, not all, but in a lot of counties across the Commonwealth, 2 or 3 or 3 members of the elected Board of Commissioners. Here we have county council, but 3 members of the commissioners, or all 3 of the commissioners, serve as the Board of Elections. That can become a conflict, or that's how Delaware County viewed it, at least. So what they did is they set up a system where they appoint 3 individuals, 1 from each major party, and then a 3rd member. So it used to be 2-1 Republican, it's now 2-1 Democrat. And those individuals oversee basically the policy and the high level questions. And when we do have to have a polling place change, it has to go before the Board of Elections. When there's a question about whether certain provisional ballots should be counted, and it's an interpretation of law, that goes before the Board of Elections. And different policies like that are set at the board level. So I think it's a very healthy structure in that the staff is not reporting to an elected official who might be inadvertently or indirectly overseeing their own election. These are 3 persons who are not elected officials.
Well, we've made some progress over time, and I wanted to check also with you. I know we went to the Court of Common Pleas with our redistricting, and Judge Wieland took a decision on that on July 23rd. And where does it go? I believe he has approved it.
Yes.
So now what's the next step? I think it's the Department of State. Am I correct?
You're correct. So it's before the Department of State, which is verifying that there are natural boundaries between precincts, and as well as no splitting of any
neighborhoods or things like that.
Census blocks. So trust me, as recently as last Friday, I was in touch with them saying we need to move the ball because we want to get going on moving the voters, making sure that they get their mailings. We're going to be doing 3 mailings, 1 in September, 1 in October, 2 in October, to make sure that every single voter, whether they're voting by mail or voting in person, is advised of where their polling place is.
Well, it's unfortunate we don't know while we're having this interview that it's an up or down decision, but we're optimistic it'll work out and our election will run as smoothly and as fairly as possible. And the League will do everything we can to support that effort of informing our voters. Do you have any closing words of advice for the Radnor voters?
Well, I just want to encourage any parents, especially of college students. They can either vote from home or they can vote from their college campus. They just can't do both. So it's important, especially for returning college students, to update their registration if they're voting from their campus, because chances are they're not living in the same, if they were like me, not living in the same dorm or rental unit that they were last spring. So that's an important thing. The registration deadline is coming up in October, but please don't wait. Just go online once they get settled in their dorm or university. Also, if you've moved in the last year or the last 5 months, whenever, please go online and update your registration. Just search Delco Votes and then click on voter registration. It'll take you to the site. You need your pen.id or your driver's license, and everything should go smoothly from there. If you don't have one of those 2 things, you need, at a minimum, the last 4 digits of your Social Security number.
Well, that's always a wonderful reminder for all of us to check that registration and also change anything that needs to be changed before the October 21st deadline. Well, thank you, Jim. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I appreciate your time and expertise in helping us better understand the redistricting process. Once we have that word from the Secretary of State, we'll get everyone notified and make sure everything runs as fairly and smoothly as possible. Now, of course, we want to thank Radnor Network 21 because they're instrumental in helping to keep us informed and helping our community understand the issues that are so important to us. We're also grateful for their ongoing service on so many occasions. Finally, we appreciate you, our audience, who have hope will share these changes about polling places with their friends and neighbor. Consider also joining the League of Women Voters to continue our efforts in helping to make democracy work. Take care and stay well. Thank you.